The Garden is an open, inclusive, Christ-like community
where people from many paths
gather to explore, engage, and seek inspiration.
To transform our world
through the unconditional love of God.
Explore,
engage,
inspire.
Join us online, in person, and in the community, while featuring local artists. Grow with us online Sundays at 9:15 a.m.
We're glad you're here.
Hello, gardeners. Greetings from Roberts Park United Methodist Church, where we're having a conversation today. I'm going to give you a little background on this conversation. As many of you know, we have been participating in the Engaging Young Adults grant through the Center for Congregations. As part of that grant, we moved in one direction, trying to have an interfaith conversation and an Earth Day event, and it didn't happen because of COVID-19. In the interim, we have had many different situations in our nation around issues of racial inequity, around people being harmed by the police, and a number of issues that have gone on for perhaps hundreds of years have come to light. And so the team came together and determined that maybe now is the time for the garden to explore how we're truly being open and inclusive. So using the Engaging Young Adults grant, we're exploring what young adults have to say and what we can learn from them in regards to racial diversity and equity. Today, I am meeting with Josh Riddick. Josh and I have been in conversation for some time. And Josh, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So hello, gardeners. I'm excited to be here for this conversation today. My name is Josh Riddick. I'm a Near East Side Indianapolis resident. I'm also one of the founders of the Kindred Collective, which is an organization here locally that helps churches and nonprofits move towards a more expansive understanding of racial equity and engage across cross-cultural lines. So I'm excited to be having this dialogue today and share a little bit about my story, listen to some of Carolyn's story, and help influence, I hope, the garden story. I'm a father, I'm a husband, dog owner, a basketball junkie, and hip-hop head. So those are probably the 5 most important things about me, and I am enamored and captivated by the story of the divine that we engage with here in our faith communities, and excited to integrate that into our understanding of what it means to be a just and loving community.
There's something happening here.
What it is ain't exactly clear. There's a man with a gun over there
telling me I got to beware.
I think it's time we stop, children. What's that sound? Everybody look what's going down. There's battle lines being drawn.
Nobody's right if everybody's wrong.
Young people speaking their minds, getting so much resistance from behind.
It's time we stop. Hey, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going down.
Field day for the heat. 1,000 people in the street,
singing songs and carrying signs.
I mostly say hooray for our side. It's time we stop. Here, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going down.
Paranoia strikes deep
into your life it will creep. It starts when you're always afraid. You step out of line, the men come and take you away. We better stop. Hey, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going down. Hey, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going down. Stop now, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going down. Stop, children, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going down. Stop now, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going down. Stop, hey, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going down.
Garners, join me in the words of welcome and prayer. Shalom, shalom, namaste, and peace. And now, pray of God. God, thank you for joining us. We thank you for everything you did from us people. Goodbye, Garners. Have a great day.
Greetings and peace to you, Garden community. My name is Manon Voice, and I am a poet, a spoken word artist, a hip-hop MC, a social justice advocate, and a practicing contemplative. And I am thankful for the opportunity to contribute to your Getting Comfortable with Being Uncomfortable series.
Josh, the Garden's mission statement is the Garden is an open, inclusive, Christ-like community where people from many paths gather to explore, engage, and seek inspiration to share in the transformation of the world with the love of God. I'm sure you'll have that memorized by the time of our end of our 4 weeks together. But in any case, inclusiveness has always been very important to us, and we have worked hard to create an inclusive community, but primarily around LGBTQ challenges that the Methodist Church has faced, and the Garden has always been highly committed to that. But we recognize that our inclusiveness certainly has parameters, and we are a community that is primarily white, and so I just wish to be transparent with you on that, and that though we say we're inclusive, we certainly have plenty of room to grow.
Sure.
So that is what we proclaim. We're 25 years old. We're celebrating our 25th anniversary right now, and but we're also exploring what kind of church is God calling us to be in the next 25 years. And given the state of our nation today, we recognize that if we truly say we wish to be inclusive, what does that look like? And how can we be more inclusive? You recommended this book to me, which I have recommended to gardeners for the last couple of weeks. And I have to tell you, it was a great book. It's a great read, but it also hits home. I've been a pastor, a white pastor, for well over 20 years now. And a number of the initiatives that Austin talks about in the book are initiatives in which I've been part of. And there was a little part of me that became a little defensive periodically. And then other times I felt as though I had failed. And other times that I recognized the position I've put my Black friends in, asking for their love and support, or absolution, I think is what she calls it in the book. So that's kind of where I am, and where the garden is.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, one, thank you for reading this. I think it's so important that we allow the voices of Black folks, particularly Black women, to influence our understanding of the world. And what tends to happen in these moments of like heightened racial awareness, so we kind of clamor for books and what's the first book we can get, and those are both usually written by men, usually written by white people, you know, and they're not bad books by any stretch of the imagination. But they don't always speak to the full expansive experience of what it means to be an American, what it means to be a Christian, what it means to be in the context that we call ours. So thank you for reading that. And I do want to unpack a little bit about those emotions that you just named. And then maybe in the backdrop hold the question, who is the garden becoming? I really like that you're looking forward another 25 years after looking back 25 years. And I absolutely don't want to discredit the work that you and other gardeners have done to become a community that embraces folks who are outside the boundaries, the very rigid boundaries of heteronormativity. That is a bold thing to do in Indianapolis, and certainly can't discredit that. But when we say we want to be a Christ-like community, that has to mean that we are able to embrace some of our most vulnerable people, which, yes, are folks on the LGBTQ spectrum, but also are folks of people of color. And we're seeing that vulnerability day in and day out as agents of the state can murder a Black person without any recourse, and can do that time and time again. And the system is not capable of checking or stopping that. And so as we think about what it means to be a Christ-like community, how do we love people across racial lines who are hurting, who are in pain, who are being abused and marginalized? And what does it mean for us to be that community looking forward 25 years? So before we really dive into that, you had mentioned some of the emotions you were feeling from the book. You named defensiveness. Can you tell me a little bit more about how you came to that awareness within yourself and what exactly made you defensive?
I'm trying to think specifically when she talks about the initiatives of the church, and saying that we want to be inclusive, yet still the leadership is all white, or I have been involved in different situations before where we have profoundly transformed leadership. And I'm not sure it was the most positive time in ministry for me. Sure. So it in part is probably why those initiatives never really worked, because we weren't able to really live out the wholeness of the experience. And plus in the church, you know, you're usually only there 4 or 5 years and then it's on to the next thing, particularly in the Methodist church. So, sure. And that there were some painful times for me. You know, it was almost like forced friendships. Okay. You are going to be friends. You're going to put on this united front. You're going to, you're going to, you know, I don't think anybody actually said that to me. But, and all the while, everyone's trying to do the ministry they do. Sure. So then there's also that competitive edge around it. It was, I worked at a large church, so. Okay. So I became, I like to succeed, and I like to say that that was a successful time in ministry for me. But she made me feel, because she can make me feel. She brought to light for me that perhaps I was part of the problem. Yeah. And not part of the solution.
Absolutely. So within your position at the Garden, and the initiatives that the church has done, Did you pull any sense of defensiveness, or as she even says, churches do these initiatives to create these kind of diversity outcomes, but ultimately fail, but still pat themselves on the back and say, hey, we did it. Do you feel that those maybe have happened at the Garden, or maybe you see a way in which that has manifested before during your time there?
I've been part of the Garden for just 5 years. And in those 5 years, what's really most interesting is when I think about diversity, it's more around diversities of faith.
Sure.
So when I came into the Garden and took over the Garden, it was what defined more as a Celtic spirituality.
Not cult. Celtic.
Not cult. Celtic spirituality. Yeah. And Jesus was not making many. Wasn't making the service very often.
Sure.
I might get myself in trouble with my predecessor here if I'm. But in any case, when I came in, the church had made it clear, this is a United Methodist Church, and we need to be a United Methodist Church.
Sure.
And so I had to work to that end, while continuing to be open to other faith traditions. That's why we say we're many paths, right? So we are open to a variety of different traditions, right. But we're still Christ-like.
Yeah. Which I think is super beautiful. Something that I hold a lot, that one of the things I really appreciate about the Christian tradition, and Protestants aren't always great at this, Western Protestants in particular, is that we follow a divine Trinity, right? 3 in 1. Right. And the Trinity is in constant communion with one another, constant pursuit of one another, constantly making space for one another, never dissolving of one part of the entity for the sake of the other.
And what Trinity is, guys, is God, Jesus, and the Holy Spirit. I just want to make sure some.
Yes. So, very core tenet aspect, and one of the unique things about Christianity that I think makes it unique compared to other faiths. But within that concept, there is this communal God, both with self and then holding space for humanity. And I think a lot of times our faith communities, in the pursuit of that, as you were mentioning, this church is pivoting to wanting to include Jesus, wanting to include the Trinity, to truly be United Methodist Church, we sometimes lose sight of the fact that God is a communal God. And so if God is this divine figure that's making space for the other, embracing the other, we are good at doing that with some people, but not all people.
Well, and let me make it clear, the Garden really is a resistant United Methodist Church.
Which I think is pretty cool.
Yeah, there is not a, there is a great challenge in that. So yes, we are Christ-centered, but we certainly are not going to ask a Muslim to come in and give their life to Christ.
Right.
We love and respect, see the divine in you and the divine in me. So,
and I think there's something really holy about resistance to institutions like that. I think there's something really holy about pressing against that required order for the sake of having that embrace, for the sake of not pushing someone away. And the question I'm holding in the conversations we've had prior is, for a community that can represent that so well in some particular areas, what are the barriers to being able to express that in ways that reflect along racial lines? How is it we were able to do that so well, certainly not without conflict or challenge, but do it what seems so well along lines of sexuality, but maybe haven't been as successful along lines of race?
Well, I would say that our structure, I mean, well, I guess I would ask, if you start with the worship experience, right? So our worship experience is pretty homogenous, I mean, we're pretty white, right? Sure. So we're pretty, I mean, I like to say we're hippies. And we use thematic worship and rock and roll, and there is not a lot of, and this is, I am kind of putting a racial bent on worship, right? My experience of worship. So I would say that worship-wise, our service is what we are used to. and not necessarily created in such a way that would include a larger diverse community, Black community.
Yeah, yeah.
As far as leadership is concerned, you know, we're the community that have 11 African American people in the community, and we ask folks to lead, and when they're comfortable, they lead. And but oftentimes, folks aren't ready to make that kind of commitment, or you know, and I would say that across all lines. But I wonder if the Black friends I asked to serve in leadership think, I'm one of 8 Black people in your church. I'm not really going to serve in that role or whatever. I don't know.
So I think you're naming a really important dichotomy there of the worship presentation presents, it's a presentation in a number of ways. So there's like deeply influencing and powerful experiences that can come out of that process. To simply say, if we had more of a Black expression, then Black people would show up, I don't think does justice to the nuances there, and you know that. But a lot of the churches I work with believe that if we just change our presentation, that's really what's holding people back. And I want to draw this line, this differentiation between, for a couple of reasons, this differentiation between comfortability and safety. So there's a level of comfortability when I come into a space. I know that music. I know that liturgical practice. I know that theme. I know the style of preaching and teaching. There's comfortability there, and that can draw somebody in. But comfortability generally doesn't keep people there. Safety does. And as we think about this worship series we're going through of getting comfortable with being uncomfortable, I think it's really important to know where to draw the line of, if you're uncomfortable in this conversation, that doesn't mean you're unsafe. And if you make something more comfortable for people of color, that doesn't necessarily make them more safe. And we have to know where those differences is. So as a community of faith, there's a question to hold is, how do we make people feel safe? And who gets to feel safe in our community and who doesn't get to feel safe in our community? And that ideally leads you to the question of, well, I don't know what makes Black people feel safe. I don't know what makes Latinx and Asian people feel safe. And then that is where the work starts to happen. Then we have to figure out, if I don't know what safety means, is it possible that I'm creating spaces and experiences that aren't safe? And until I know what safety looks like, I can't possibly create a comfortable experience either. That it keeps people engaged, keeps people involved.
That's interesting. Because now that I've read this book, I might have, us having this conversation, I might have left this conversation and called a gardener, and said, how can I make a safe environment for you to be in? And then I would have been part of the problem.
Right, and that's a great response. So, this book, I think, is incredibly helpful in that way. And to be able to say, the response isn't to go absolve it somewhere else.
Right.
It's good. And Austin provides a lot of great context for what safety means. And, I think some of the same ways we think about safety for our LGBTQ family, we have to think of the same way for non-white folks. What are the threats to their existential being? What are the threats to their world? How do we create a space in our community where those aren't threats? How to create a space in our community where those aren't something they have to be worried about? How often are microaggressions playing out in the community of faith? How often and how...
What's a microaggression?
Yeah, so a microaggression is like a small comment that can be made that usually is deeply racialized. An example would be, wow, Josh, you're really well-spoken. I get that a lot. I'm proud of my capacity for public speaking, but the assumption that I wouldn't be well-spoken, where does that come from? We don't tell the white guy you have a video conversation with, that person was really well-spoken. We do that for people of color because we assume that they are not going to bring a particular level of skill when they speak as orators. And so that's one that I hear a lot of. Microaggressions could include, going up to someone who is maybe Latinx or Asian, or in my case, biracial. What country are you from? Where are you from? Oh, I'm from Indianapolis. No, where are you really from? Where are your family from? Our family's from Michigan and Virginia. And those are questions, again, I've received those as well. And again, those dig at whatever identity I think you have. I have a perception that it came from this space or exists in a particular way that isn't true. And so we manifest that out. And that digs at the ability to feel safe because you don't feel seen, you don't feel recognized. And, in the example of, wow, you're really well spoken, there's an ingrained assumption that I'm not capable of something, that I'm inferior. And when I come to the table, and that's what I hear first and foremost, as I do from some spaces I'm in, well, I don't feel safe here because I'm automatically perceived as one who is not going to be able to bring a particular level or quality of skill, even though I'm up here with other people who also have this skill. Does that make sense?
Yes, and it makes sense when I actually think about my, when you become your parents, right? So I'm becoming my parent, and so whatever it was that my parents would say that I would go, oh, that's so, terrible. Well, that's where I am now, right? So I would say that I would never say that, right? I would never say, oh, Josh, you're so well spoken. But I would say something, right? I'm not sure what it is right now, but I would say something, and I would imagine that a number of us would.
Yeah.
So my first thought to say is, well, but it would never be my intention to harm you or make a place unsafe for you.
Yes. And that is another really important dichotomy that we have to name, is that, excuse me, for most people, the idea of racism is exclusively about behavior and intention. And that is not true. We might use terms like racism equals power plus privilege, which again is not a fully expansive and compatible definition for a couple of reasons. One is it scapegoats most people from their responsibility of participating and benefiting from racist systems. So if you say, well, the dudes in Charlottesville who were marching saying blood and soil with tiki torches, those are the real racists. My cousin, my uncle, who sometimes make off-color jokes about Hispanic people, well, that's just them. And we find ways to remove people from the burden and responsibility of just being better. And we find ways to remove ourselves from benefiting from corrupt systems. So the definition that we use at the Kindred Collective comes from Dr. Shaniqua Walker Barnes, theologian, counselor, incredible woman. And her definition is racism is a system of white supremacy that centers an interlocking system of white supremacy that centers and upholds the values, customs, cultures, aesthetics of white people as superior. So what I mean by that is when you go to the grocery store and you need to go get shampoo, you might go to the shampoo aisle, grab your shampoo bottle, dip out of there, boom. When I go to the grocery store, I go to a space called the ethnic hair care section because that store has already reminded me that I don't get shampoo, I get something that's different. I'm already made out to be different. There are folks in this country who cook food that comes from Southeast Asia or comes from a Central or South American country. You go to the grocery store, there's an international or ethnic food section, as if being from the UK or Germany or Italy or France does not include an ethnicity. Those should be also ethnic foods, but they're not considered that in most spaces. Like our world is structured around the normalcy of being white. And when you sit outside of that, you're othered. So within our faith community, we have these norms that exist. And when people enter in who don't represent that norm, if we continue to allow that to be the norm, they will always feel like the other. And then we get to questions again of safety. But we also come back to this question of, if I don't acknowledge how I've participated in racist systems, because again, this is a system-wide challenge, not about individual behavior or intent. Your intent does not have to be involved to cause harm. And it's an unfortunate reality, but it is what it is. And so we have to start interrogating our own stories to figure out how that plays out. Things like the housing system, that between 1944 and 1972, 98% of federally backed loans went to white families. And when you think about the primary way in which we generate wealth in this country, it's home ownership. So for you and the gardeners who are in the space together, we can say God has blessed you in particular ways, in various material ways. We can say that. But there's also a system that is also blessing you that is not of God. Mm-hmm. And it's very easy to conflate the divine blessing and support versus a systemic blessing and support. And when we do that, we then subsequently blame those who are not as well resourced, as not having that same blessing, or maybe not working as hard, or not being as passionate, or pulling themselves up by their bootstraps, but not realizing that same system that benefited us, which sits outside of our hard work. You can work very, very hard and get far, but there's also a system that benefits you if you're white in this country. And that's not to mitigate your hard work. It just simply says that has bolstered your hard work to where a black or brown person in this country can work the same level of intensity and energy and still not get as far. If you look at black wealth in this country, the highest black wealth ever was, I believe, was in 1972, and has been in declining ever since. And it's not because black people are incapable of managing their money or their resources. It's because these systems are getting stronger and stronger and more pervasive, despite some of the narratives we may hear of equality and equity, which don't paint the full reality of what's happening.
Every day I wake and everything is broken. Turning off my phone just to get out of bed. Get home every evening and history's repeating. Turning off my phone cause it's hurting my chest. Hey, and heaven knows I'm not helpless. Yeah, but what can I do? Can't see the use in me crying if I'm not even trying to make a change I wanna see. I can't sit and hope, I can't just sit and pray that I can find a love when all I see is pain. Falling to my knees, and though I do believe, I can't just preach, baby, preach. All I hear is voices, everybody's talking. Nothing real is happening, 'cause nothing is new. Now when all is tragic and I just feel sedated, why do I feel numb? Is that all I can do? Yeah. And heaven knows I'm not helpless, yeah, but I'm only human. Can't see the use in me crying if I'm not even trying to make a change I wanna see. I can't sit and hope, I can't just sit and pray that I can find a love when all I see is pain. Falling to my knees, and though I do believe, I can't just preach, baby, preach. Whoa, 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 whoa. I can't just preach, baby, preach. And heaven knows I'm not helpless, but what can I do? Yeah, can't see the use in me crying if I'm not even trying to make a change I wanna see. I can't sit and hope, I can't just sit and pray that I can find a love when all I see is pain. I try to do the things I say that I believe. I can't just preach, baby, preach. Whoa, 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 whoa. I can't just preach, baby, preach. Whoa, 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 whoa.
Today I would like to share with you the Gospel according to Luke 10, chapter 10, 1 through 9. After this, the Lord appointed 72 others and sent them 2 by 2 ahead of them to every town and place where he was about to go. He told them, "The harvest is plenty, but the workers are few. Ask the Lord of the harvest, therefore, to send out workers into the harvest field. Go, I am sending you out like lambs among wolves. Do not take a purse or a bag or a sandals, and do not greet anyone along the road. When you enter a house, first say, 'Peace to this house.' If someone who promotes peace is there, your peace will rest on them. If not, it will be returned to you. Stay there, eating and drinking whatever they give you, for the workers deserve his wages. Do not move around from house to house. When you enter a town and are welcomed, eat what is offered to you, heal the sick who are there, and tell them, 'The kingdom of God, it has come near to you.'" Amen. Today's gospel tells us that we should be thankful for what we have and know what we deserve. We need to extend the wildest range of help and to spread the word of kindness. This is a kindness without complaint or negative actions, and we need to learn to treat everything as a blessing. So today for the prayer, I would like to share the Lasallian prayer for peace. We pray to you, O Lord, God of life and God of those who hope. Listen to our prayer for the whole world, for peace among all people, for prosperity in all lands. We pray to you that evil may be overcome and that all wars may end. We pray to you especially for the members of the Lasallian family who suffer from war, injustice, and intolerance, and for the children and young people who are poor and neglected. We pray to God for your peace in our lives, in our towns, in our schools, in our families, and in our own hearts. We pray for a peace that the world cannot give us. We pray for a peace that will make us whole and transform us into ambassadors of justice for your sake. Lord, give us your peace. Amen.
Right now in our nation and in our world, I believe that we are going through a great time of reckoning. We are all living in some necessary discomfort to really dig deep and address the deeper ills of our society, of our communities, to look at our privilege, to look at the ways that we have been complicit. It is all up to us to do the work that is set before us to do. I wrote this poem, a spoken word piece entitled Lady Liberty, which you are about to view. And I wrote it for the Fair Housing Center of Central Indiana. I am a board member of the Fair Housing Center of Central Indiana, and housing is one of the issues that I am very passionate about. Prior to being on the board, I did not know in totality about the protracted history of racism and inequality that has been enshrined in many of the housing laws that have come forth from the United States government. And so with being on the board, I was able to learn so much about how the United States government really engineered residential segregation. You may have heard of things like redlining and even gentrification, which are all products of federal housing policies. And so if you think about the last century in America and how the housing landscape has been sculpted, we can recall federal government programs like the New Deal, which helped millions and millions of people be able to obtain the dream of being in a home and having an affordable home. But for millions of others, and for millions of specifically people of color, African Americans, that opportunity was not afforded. That opportunity was not afforded. And African Americans specifically have been subjected to violence when it comes to housing opportunities. And I would invite you to even look further into the history of housing in this country. And you can do that here by going to the website, the Federal Housing Center of Central Indiana. So it's fhcci.org. And then there is a lot of information out there about the history of housing in the United States and how harmful it has been. This video that you are about to view only highlights some of those problems, and it also highlights the ongoing housing discrimination that we are still facing even right here in Indianapolis, in central Indiana. Going forward, housing is going to continue to be a big issue that we need to address in this country, especially as many folks are facing eviction due to the pandemic, due to the unemployment that we have seen this year. Affordable housing is something that is a basic need and should be a basic need. Being able to obtain housing and not be discriminated against due to your race or due to your ethnicity or due to your sexual orientation or due to your religious affiliation. These are all basic rights that we should all be afforded, but some are still not. And so I hope that you gain some information from this video. I hope that you continue your journey of learning, of unpacking, and of sitting with the discomfort, and also just educating yourself. So thank you for allowing me to be a part of this series, and I hope you can learn a lot from this video. Thank you.
Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free, the wretched refuse of your teeming shore. Send these, the homeless tempest tossed to me. I will lift my lamp beside the golden door. Once said Lady Liberty. She was our illuminated beacon of hope, hovering over Ellis Island, uplifting a torch of light for the lowly, for the marginalized, for the immigrant family escaping a tragic plight. And we hung on every word that fell from her tongue when she told us that we could be free, that in this great land we would find freedom, justice, and equality. She was the keeper of our American dream, and so long the masses searched for houses and neighborhoods to belong, streets to call our own, only on them to be stopped by more than red signs, to be redlined because of color, to discover that you are an other, that your blackness was a barrier that could prevent you from living in a certain area, or because of where you come from or how you pray, a landlord could turn you away, or that because of your sexual orientation, you can no longer obtain your dream home, an awful form of discrimination. Imagine that your age, ability, gender, or family size would all be reasons enough for you to be denied. Structural racism and segregation have plagued our communities for decades. Just ask the government about the New Deal and who came out winning from how the deck was played. White middle-class families profited while black and brown families were confined to projects, prey to slumlords, left in uninhabitable living conditions with no better place to afford. Millions of people intentionally failed by a system, and when their anger brewed into crime, we threw them into prison. We called them thieves, criminals, refugees, looters, and thugs. We labeled them everything else because we refused to see them as a product of us. We didn't want to take responsibility for our failed policies and our broken system that abandoned so many to generational poverty. What is the American dream when the poor and marginalized can't even sleep at night, and 50 years later we are still fighting for their basic fair housing rights? Why have everyday Americans become oppressed in the land of the free and the home of the brave? Why have their paths become trails of tears where they have been turned away? Shouldn't our inalienable rights protect us from this kind of discrimination? Isn't that what was formed in the Constitution written by the founders of this nation? Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness belongs to all of us and not just the wealthy capitalists. So now, it is our turn. It is our time to hold up the torch, to be beacons of light. We are not statues. We are living human beings. Let us mobilize with all of our might. Let us fight until every American is free. It is no longer time for us to just dream. We have been asleep far too long. Now is the time for us to wake up. The revolution of the oppressed has begun.
In the same direction, you become my own reflection. Is that your soul that you're trying to protect? I'd always hope that we would intersect, yeah. You need time to cope and time to heal, time to cry if it's what you feel. Oh, life can hurt when it gets too real. I can hold you on when it's hard to deal. Alive, alive, alive is all I wanna feel tonight, tonight. Hey you, look around, can you hear that noise? It's a rebel sound, we got nowhere else to go. And when the sun goes down and we fill the streets, we're gonna dance till the morning to the rebel speech. You can take everything from me, 'cause this is all I need. You know that life is like a ticking car. Nobody knows when it's gonna stop, yeah. Before I'm gone, I need to touch someone with a word, with a hug, with a decent song, yeah. And it gets lonely when you live out loud. When the truth that you see hidden in this crowd, you better find your voice, better make it loud. Gonna burn that fire or we'll just burn out. Alive, alive, alive is all I wanna feel tonight, tonight. I need to be where you are. Hey you, look around, can you hear that noise? It's a rebel sound, we got nowhere else to go. And when the sun goes down and we fill the streets, we're gonna dance till the morning till the rebels meet. You can't look around this world and figure out how to change it. 'Cause there's no worries, there's no cares. Feel the sound that's everywhere. We'll take what's ours for once and baby, run, run, run. Hey you, look around, can you hear that noise? It's a rebel sound, we got nowhere else to go. Hey you, look around, can you hear that noise? It's a rebel sound, we got nowhere else to go. And when the sun goes down and we clear the streets, we're gonna dance till the morning to the rebels beat. You can take everything from me. Oh yeah, you can take everything from me. This is all I need. Yeah, this is all I need.
Hi everybody, the Payne family's back with you again, and we're here for Stepping Stones today with our garden kids. And today's topic that we're going to be talking about is conversation. And conversation is really just two people talking together. And most of the time our conversations are fun, or they're nice, or they're just kind of blah. But sometimes we have conversations that are really uncomfortable for us, and we don't sometimes know how to deal with that. So today, I invited a friend who's going to help us talk about that. I've got Mr. Potato Head here, and he's going to give you some do's and don'ts when you're in an uncomfortable situation having a conversation. And if you notice Mr. Potato Head right now, he's kind of blank. He doesn't have any expression at all. He's not mad, he's not sad. And that's his first tip for you. If you're going into a conversation that you know might be a little tense, it's good if you can go in without being angry or upset or worried, if you can just try to have a positive outlook about what might come out of the conversation. And sometimes that is a real key to making things go well. Now, the first part we're going to add is Mr. Potato Head's ears. And the girls are going to stick them on for us. And I'm not sure how well you can see it on this film, but Mr. Potato Head has his hands over his ears. And he is going, la, 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 I can't hear you, I can't hear you. And that is not a good way to start a conversation with somebody. So we're going to take his hands off, and Mr. Potato Head is going to really try to listen to what the other person is saying. Sometimes when we're talking with somebody and they are telling us something, we think about what we want to say back to them, and we're thinking more about what we want to say instead of concentrating on what they're saying. So you need to kind of put your thoughts aside and listen to what that person is wanting you to know. Okay? The next part we're going to put on is Mr. Potato Head's mouth. And this is a really, really important one, because Mr. Potato Head wants you to know that it's important to use kind words, especially if you're in an uncomfortable situation. If you use kind of mean words, or if you're not very nice to that person, chances are they're going to not be nice back to you. So you need to be very, very careful to use kind words when you're speaking. And the other thing is, sometimes when we have a point we want to make with somebody, we tend to talk and go real, real fast and talk over that other person and not give them a chance to say what they have to say. So be sure that you're giving them time to tell you what they want you to know. The next thing we're going to put on is Mr. Potato Head's eyes. And Mr. Potato Head wants you to know, he wants you to look at the person you're talking to with kind eyes, to think positively about them and not maybe think, oh, they're going to be mean to me or they don't like me. Try to look at them with a positive outlook, and they will probably look at you the same way. And the last thing that Mr. Potato Head would like you to know is, before you end your conversation, even if it's been kind of uncomfortable, try to find one thing that you can agree upon with that other person. It might not be what you're talking about. It might be that you agree that you both like McDonald's French fries, or that maybe there's a TV show that you both really can't stand. But if you have one thing you can agree on, the next time you see that person, it might be easier to start up a nice conversation. And I think that's all that Mr. Potato Head has to say to you today. So we're going to end with a prayer, like we always do. So you can bow your heads. God, thank you for bringing us together this week. As we go through our coming week, please let us look at people with kind eyes and a kind heart and kind thoughts. Please watch over our garden family and keep everyone safe and well. Amen. All right, everybody, you know what we always do at the end. Put your arms out, cross your elbows, grab your shoulders, and give yourselves a hug from me. Have a good week. Bye from the Payne family.
I'd like to thank Josh Riddick for sharing in the conversation with me. This week starts the conversation and we'll continue it next week as well. I pray that you will find some new insights and some things to think about as you continue on the journey. Just a reminder, consider picking up the book and starting to read. We as a community of faith are committed to be willing to get comfortable with being uncomfortable, because being uncomfortable or even vulnerable is the only way we will continue to grow, not only as a community of faith, but as a country and a world. So, with that, go now in peace, my friends, and may the love of our God be yours today, tomorrow, and forevermore. Amen.
Every day I wake and everything is broken. Turning off my phone just to get out of bed. Get home every evening and history's repeating. Turning off my phone cause it's hurting my chest. Hey, and heaven knows I'm not helpless. Yeah, but what can I do? Can't see the use in me crying if I'm not even trying to make a change. I wanna see. I can't sit and hold